Hello and welcome to this webcast. This webcast is hosted by Scientific Computing World.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry about that. I'm back again.
Okay.
Small technical difficulty. Hello and welcome to this webcast, LIMS Innovation, Boost Precision and Security. This webcast is hosted by Scientific Computing World and sponsored by Thermo Fisher Scientific. My name is Robert Rowe. I'm the editor of Scientific Computing World, and our guest panelists today are David Joyce, Director of Product Management, Specialty LIMS at Thermo Fisher Scientific, Dr. Stephanie Passas Farmer, founder and president of Biodata Solutions Consulting and Software, and Dr. Bob McDowell, owner of McDowell Consulting. David has 24 years of experience in the LIMS industry. He has worked for Thermo Fisher for the last 20 years and spent the last 5 of those in Thermo Fisher's digital science solutions business. He is responsible for the development and innovation around the Watson LIMS software, creating successful and innovative product enhancements to serve customer needs. Stephanie is a bioanalytical expert in the areas of discovery and regulated bioanalysis of pharmaceutical, biologics, and hybrid technologies, including antibody drug conjugate technology. Relying on insights gained over a 20-year career focused on bioanalytical operations across global biopharmaceutical companies, contract research organizations, and consulting, Stephanie founded Aradne Software in 2018 and led the development of Red Thread, guiding it from inception to production as an AI-enabled solution for common challenges in bioanalytical data review. Prior to that, Stephanie founded Biodata Solutions, a scientific advisory firm that helps sponsors advance early stage molecules into potential new drug candidates through bioanalysis support and regulatory compliance planning. Bob has been an analytical chemist for more than 50 years and an independent consultant for over 32 years, and spent 6 years as a forensic toxicologist and 15 years working in pharmaceutical industry with 2 major international companies. With more than 40 years of experience in specifying, implementing, and validating LIMS, he edited the first book on LIMS in 1987 and is a 1997 LIMS awardee. He writes questions of quality and focus on quality columns in the LCGC International and Spectroscopy magazines, respectively. Bob consults and trains on digitalization, data integrity, computerized system validation for regulated GXP laboratories, and is also a trained auditor. Thank you to each of our speakers for joining us today. Now, on to the topic of today's discussion. Laboratory information management systems are primed for widespread updates, having stayed largely stagnant for the last 2 decades. As pharmaceutical companies, biotech firms, and CROs continue to seek new research and development frontiers, they need up-to-date security and compliance alongside advanced data management capabilities. To keep sensitive information protected and stay aligned with customer demands, health and science laboratories and life science laboratories globally are looking to next-gen LIMS solutions to accelerate their bioanalytical workloads while maintaining process precision. By moving to cloud-based SaaS infrastructure, granular tasks such as calibration, sample handling, and reporting can be automated, while labs remain fully compliant with stringent regulatory requirements. In this session, we aim to cover the top laboratory trends driven by technological innovation, regulatory demands, and evolving customer expectations, how LIMS technology is adapting to growing security, compliance, and customer challenges, how cloud-native modular infrastructure is boosting scalability and flexibility while ensuring that customization does not impair upgrades and validation, and finally, strategies and best practices for picking in and integrating the right supplier for next-gen data management tools. After the discussion, there will be a question and answer session which anyone can use to ask our speakers a question. If we do not have time to answer a question today, the information will be passed along to the relevant people so they can follow up at a later date. So enough from me. Sorry about the long-winded intro. Without further ado, the first question to our panelists. What are the driving forces pushing laboratories to modernize their informatics infrastructure? David, can we pass this over to you first?
Yeah. I think some of the trends are the same ones we've been seeing for years, which is doing more with less. I think now though we're looking more around, what sort of tools are allowing us to do that. There's obviously a huge amount of excitement around AI. Everybody doesn't want to miss that boat. But then, there's the other side of automation, so laboratory automation. The ability to carry out many more experiments in an efficient ma manner and a quality manner without having to increase your headcount. I think they're sort of some of the bigger pushes. I just came back from the European Bioanalytical Forum in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago. I think the things that were sort of on their lips sort of really gelled as well. Some industry parts of the industry have been sort of mired in their validation processes, and especially in that particular niche that we're talking about with Watson, people tend not to change for years because it takes a long time to do validation. There was an acknowledgement there that that needs to change, and the driving forces are that efficiency, so the ability to be able to do more with less, but also around the threats of cybersecurity. We mentioned it in the intro there. We have to be able to react very rapidly when we get bad actors, as they call it, trying to hack into our systems and whatever. We can't just leave the system set in stone for 3 years now. We need to put those security updates, and that was kind of acknowledged in that keynote as well. There are some new tools we've got to be able to do that, and I think actually my two partners on the call might be able to talk about it more than I can. But the FDA is giving us more leave to change as well with things like computer systems validation guidance. So there's a lot going on at the moment, and that's sort of driving us forward, even outside of the technology, I would say.
And I would just add into the, oops, sorry.
No,
I'm so
carry on,
sorry.
carry on. I was going to ask you anyway, so by all means.
Oh, yeah.
I was just going to add into that when it comes to computer system validation. We have to, I've seen a lot of comments about like David mentioned about being bogged down by it, but the requirements of it are really key because of data integrity and data security. They're cyber security as well. So I've heard a lot of discussion. I went to a meeting a couple of months ago on computer system like a risk assessment as well. So for computer system validation and assessments, might be a little more agile of approach while still having things fully locked down, but leading to the agile nature that David mentioned of being able to adapt and add patches, because that is actually something that we can do a risk-based assessment to understand what needs to be, rather than having to go through a full validation all at the same time. Perhaps there are just key components that we can look and ascertain, as well as have more of a continuous monitoring as well. So that there's different options that might be able to lead to a more agile nature of our computer systems to keep them more up to date, and less, honestly, less risk if we can.
And just a quick addendum there. I didn't mention the other thing that seemed to be on everyone's lips was this new EU cybersecurity directive, whereby, I think it's December 2027 that comes into effect. And computer software vendors are going to be liable for any known risks that are in their systems and have to give plans of action to be able to remedy them. And I think that's going to shake things up as well. People are not going to be able to stay on legacy systems because I think people are going to have to switch, essentially switch them off because of the cybersecurity issues.
Either that, or you end up with, you put them behind a firewall and they're not connected to anything.
Yeah, yeah, and we had our head of software security, Thane Eriksson, VP for the corporation on that, and he was talking about those approaches, and he called that a soft center. Essentially, he said that when you actually get through the firewall, you're in this place, and people can quite easily. Then you've got this soft center that people can attack as well. So the EU's making us bring everything up, whether it's inside or outside, to that higher standard, which it's a challenge.
If I could just get back to, both of you mentioned computer system validation, or more technically, computerized system validation. The issue is that people say, oh, yes, I get bogged down. The problem is that they don't move with the times. They haven't learned that if you're going to apply risk-based processes, this goes back to the general principles of software validation the FDA published for medical devices and biologics in 2002. It's in GAMP 5, first edition, 2008. It's in a risk-based approach is in GMP and Annex 11, but obviously we're going to be talking about GLP and GCP, but there are still risk-based approaches, and you have to be in a position to defend yourself. Now, I don't want to go into talking about CSV when we're here to talk about LIMS, but I think it's important that people actually keep up to speed and you vary your approaches dependent on the risk. The closer you can come to a standard software package, let me put it this way, are you lazy? Because what you want to do is rip off what the supplier has done and leverage it into your validation. That makes things so much easier. Anyway, I'll go back in my shell.
No, that's fine.
That's excellent. Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie. Sorry.
I was also, I mean, and I know we're going to LIMS, but as we move into incorporating more forms of AI, the issue that we also have, and that's another thing that I foresee in the next, 5 to 10 years, is pulling in various different, might not all be like large language models, or there's a whole bunch of different types of AI that might be used, but especially adaptive systems, which have a lot of the power for report generation. And that would be really key to sit above a LIMS to be able to overcome some of the issues that we're having with some manual processes when you have a LIMS-based system that's computerized. When you're pulling in AI techniques, no matter what they are, if they're adaptive, you can't do a computer system validation like we did before. So because it's constantly adapting, you don't know, not only do you not know how it got from point A to point B, if you ask it how it got from point A to point B, it might not tell you the real truth of how it got there. It might give you, so how do we treat our computer systems as a laboratory technician that's learning along the way? That goes to risk-based assessment as well, right? And having stepping back from the idea of just validating it once, like David mentioned, and like not touching it for another 10 years. That's just not going to be, even as an end user, we can't expect that to be the situation. We have to be more actively engaged, like you said, not be lazy. It will put more work in some ways, but it'll make the overall workload less. So it is that penny wise, pound foolish. Like, we don't want to avoid the work up front or build it into our workflows to save in the long term work for the end user and the industry overall.
The problem with AI, if you're talking large language models, certainly with the draft GMP Annex 22, you can't use them. It's as simple as that. Whereas the FDA is a lot more pragmatic, because in their January 2025 draft guidance for use of AI in regulatory decision making, there's more granularity, more involvement with the the agency itself to discuss with them, and there is a lot more control in place. Whereas the Annex 22 is much more, it's vaguer.
Yeah,
is probably the best way to look at it.
You've been involved with some of the feedback for the FDA, haven't you? And some of the committees in pharmaceutical. Where was it you were recently?
I was, sorry.
Oh, no, it was Stephanie.
Sorry.
Conversations.
Oh no, it's okay. Yeah, I have had multiple conversations, especially earlier in the year when more feedback was forthcoming in the January. Yeah, I did kind of compile the American Association of Pharmaceutical Sciences AI ML guidance feedback from the industry. I was talking to various different individuals within the agency about the guidances, especially the January one that came out, because you're right, it did give us a lot more leeway, because previously, if anything used ML or anything adaptive, it was going to have to go software as a medical device. So people stood back, which more goes, like you said, more locked down. So it's they gave us now a roadmap to go into it, especially if it's some sort of efficiency driving system, which would be what we're referring to with the LIMS-based system, and pulling in AI. And then also granularity around not all AI is created equal. So what are the ones we're worried about versus not, and gave us really a validation plan. But yes, I've been working with EBF as well, or at least attending those sessions to understand how our European colleagues are dealing with it. And then I will be also going to Japan to speak to the Japanese Biological Forum about more of a global understanding of where we're standing. It is a very evolving field, and I am no way an expert. I'm a chemist. I'm not even, my C++ days were my old coding days, so that just aged myself. But yes, I have been working with that, and it is interesting to see it evolve. And that is where we are standing right now currently, which I understand there is a fear hallucinations are real of AI. But I know we're getting away from the LIMS-based discussion.
Yeah.
But so I want to go back to LIMS, but I see that LIMS is going to be how DJ and I have been thinking and talking about LIMS is there's your laboratory, like the informatics system, that's key, but we're going to have to get different applications to be able to feed into that LIMS system to make our workflow more efficient, not so manual. We are, decades behind a lot of different sectors in globally, but we are risk-averse people doing a very risky job. We have patients and patients' data and patients' lives at stake. So we're going to be very cautious. So how can we take that cautious nature and the positivity of being constantly trying to find how the sky is going to fall, but also adapt and live in the real world, because we will be, we won't be able to keep up, because everything's moving much quicker than we can even
it's moving faster than we can keep up, and it's moving a lot faster than the regulators can keep up.
It's an exhausting world right now with that, but it's exciting as well.
Exciting as well, I've got to say. And it's interesting, Bob. I didn't realize you were editing for Spectroscopy magazine as well. I kind of fell back to my spectroscopy days, sort of as leader of Graham's software.
Oh, good Lord, that goes back a bit.
It does, but there's that whole idea of chemometric modeling, and some of the chemometric modeling were very reticent about using it because they couldn't necessarily see how deterministic it was, and they came up with mechanisms for checking and rechecking and putting it in a black box, but ensuring that it still worked as it was expected to within parameters. And I feel we might be going over that sort of threshold again with the AI tool.
There is that. It is better if AI is more visible, because I have a feeling that many companies are sneaking AI in through the back door for doing things. And I mean, chromatography is one of the places for peak integration and things like that, but it needs to be carefully managed. And it needs to be very carefully controlled, because chromatography has been at the heart of many data integrity problems over the years.
Yeah, I mean, testing to pass, and all of the stuff that we've had to lock things down because of the bottle of lies we're talking about. People doing that themselves. If we can get the AI to do it, I mean, I would encourage anybody to go to some of the information that comes from the EBF on this. I went to some really good sessions where scientists have just tried various different, the GPTs and whatever of the world, and they were doing chromatography. They were seeing how, and it was getting close. And it's when something gets that close and it seems very plausible, I think it's very, you want to use it. You think, we're nearly there. And I think it's. But it's that 95%, is that knowledge that it's going to do it every time. I think that we need to get to the point of being able to codify.
Yeah.
And And I do think that that's where we also fall, is that proof of concepts are one thing, but once we throw a whole bunch of variability, right, and not just one end user, that we need to, when we're actually training the systems, a lot of times what we have is, if we just having like one or two single source. We just ran into this over the summer with our own different forays into LLMs and different AI, is that you have to throw a lot of variability at it as well. And data structure and variability is really key. So it might get you, really excited at first, but then taking a step back and having that human interaction and data variability, and understanding that you may unintentionally putting in bias, right? There's certain AI solutions that are external to our field, but that you'll do a full validation and you'll throw a whole bunch of different data sets and a lot of edge cases, and then you'll start to use it. And after 6 months, because then it receives it from a single source, it's completely narrowed, and it has to open it up and revalidate it almost with a more open data set, because it's basically narrowed itself, and now doesn't know how to handle the edge cases that it originally was validated for.
Yeah.
So it can be crazy. So it can show really big promise, but that human augmented intelligence, having that key interactive bit of the human, we're always going to have to read our
Loop, they
reports.
were
We
using
can't
as a
just
phrase.
set.
Yeah.
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 What was that? Human augmented
Human in the
intelligence.
loop. I think that was human in the loop, a phrase that I used a lot last week, 2 weeks
Yeah,
ago.
always has to have the human in the loop. So you can't just expect it to read your reports for you. You've got to actually still own the data.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the limbs.
Back to the
I
limbs.
think Robert's got us on question one, and we've got
No,
our hobby
this is
horse.
We've got
yeah, this is perfect. These two
Oh,
discussions,
yeah.
the more that they kind of naturally evolve, the better, I think. But on that note, we're talking about AI tools and kind of how people kind of want to use them, and then the reality of the situation. I mean, how have customer expectations evolved over the past decade? What is it that people expect out of their LIMS at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick that up as the
Something
limit.
that works.
Yeah, something that works.
everything.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
I'll take that on as the LIMS product manager. I have to take that one on the chin. But yes, yeah. I mean, there's definitely that pace of progress and being able to keep up with the regulation. Even sometimes the regulations can't keep up with us, but then also if you're following the regulations, it's difficult and detailed work to be able to encode that type of stuff into a LIMS system. So people definitely want the thing that works, and does it consistently. And as Bob was saying earlier in the conversation, it sort of gives it to you without you having to build that all from scratch, because scientists love playing with computers, and they're tool makers and tool users, if you like, by nature, and they will build things if they don't exist, and that means you get into with a lot of variability from customer, yeah, individual to individual, company to company, and I think getting some sort of consensus there is really good. That's why I like the EBF and WRIB as well. They tend to try and guide a body of people together to say, right, this is what we want. Now, software company, go and make it.
Yeah,
Do it.
it's from a consultant or an ex-lab manager's perspective, having customized a commercial QC system in the 1980s to work in a bioanalytical lab, if I'd have thought of another way of torture, I'm not quite certain what it would be, but the job is never finished. And therefore, what I think is important is all laboratories are the same, except for the differences. But one of the things about implementing a LIMS is you try and change the process to match the software, providing you meet your business objectives. Because that means you can implement the system that much faster. You can leverage what the supplier has done to reduce the amount of work you have to do internally. And within the project, you configure, preferably turn things on and off rather than writing code or pseudocode or something like that, because that will make the job easier And what that means is that new updates that come through are going to be a lot easier to handle. I co-authored an article a couple of years back with Paul Smith, and we called it the Museum of Analytical Antiquities. And if you go back through some labs, lurking around somewhere, you'll find a Vista system. You may find a very early Windows. You may even find a DOS system somewhere because someone hasn't got the money to throw it out. And this is the stupidity you've got to keep up because, as you were saying, David, it's the cybersecurity and everything else that's important. And when you start to see regulations coming out and guidance coming out from regulators talking about cybersecurity penetration testing, then you start to see things in a totally different light.
Yeah, absolutely. And Windows Vista, I can't.
Oh,
It even existed.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But I
The
mean,
other,
yeah, I was going
oh,
to say
sorry.
one of the things that Thane Erickson said in his presentation at EBF. He talked at a very high level. He sees things from the corporate point of view. He said if you've got one Windows XP on your network and somebody gets access to it, they can get access to all of your passwords,
Everything.
domain controller within minutes. It's not even hours because it's a exploitation there. And we sometimes see those in labs. Thankfully, we put our labs within a firewall within the corporate firewall, but that doesn't really necessarily protect them anymore. And then people are very good at getting, socially engineering their way in. And once they do, all of your passwords to all of your systems, and then they won't be attacking the lab anymore. They'll be attacking the corporation that in where that lives. But I just
Uh,
more company
sorry,
called Merck
Stephanie.
had a few problems in 2017, if I remember rightly.
They say that I couldn't possibly comment, Bob.
Well, you end up with the CEO with a starring role in front of Congress.
There you go. Yeah, so that's quite public knowledge. Yeah. Stephanie, sorry, you were speaking.
Oh no, I was speaking, I was going to go back to the difference of what I'm seeing for a customer usage expectation, like even my own experience, which is sits on top of a LIMS, is that I find that it seems to be like a chasm between you have a generation that is used to kind of what we're doing now, and the fear of changing from that, right? Which is, expectations have been met and change is scary. But then you have the individuals that are coming on the other side of it, where I had feedback that they didn't even want to fill out a web form. They wanted everything on a chatbot basis. They don't even want the same interaction of what we're used to before. And I'm like, the web form takes 5 seconds to fill out, and it's like 3 questions. But they're like, nope, don't want that. Want a chatbot. So, and it just seems like there's like it's an all or nothing experience, and maybe the best way to move forward is to somewhat meet in the middle and kind of gravitate to each other, so that way we can get progress forward, because those two things are actually hindering progress, because it's all or nothing on either side. At least that's my own experience, because both are not attainable or like sustainable right now. The chatbot system, obviously, because it's too advanced right now, so you can't really validate a lot of that experience, or you might not have approval to work with like LLMs within that secured system to the way that we've done it before, which is just not sustainable because of needing to progress and have greater security and all the things that you've talked to before. So that's from my standpoint, standing outside, I'm seeing that, and neither side wants to come together, perhaps because of where they stand.
But this goes back to the sort of continuum of users that you have in a lab, that you have people that I suppose I would classify as hackers. These are really the people that like to get into the software. They want to find out all the nuts and bolts. Then you have the technophiles that are really happy, but they understand that things will go wrong, but they're tolerant of that. Then you start moving into the other side of the Gaussian curve, where you get technophobes, which is, Oh, I love paper and spreadsheets. And then of
Mm.
course you get down to the dinosaurs. And yeah, enough
Yeah,
said.
I just find that there's very few people that sit in the middle right now. So it's hard to go from one side to the
Mm.
other, I think is why, at least that's what I'm seeing right now. And I think we just need to kind of all come
There's a
to the
demographic change
understanding.
always going on as well, isn't there? I mean,
Yeah,
there's the
yeah.
demographic
There
change,
it
and
is.
I think there's the character traits that Bob was talking about. I think that the corporations, though, are really starting to notice and realize this change is needed. I know, especially in around the Cambridge, Mass sort of area,
Yes.
some of the companies we've been working with, everyone's been doing. I don't, Bob, how long have you been doing Lab of the Future? I've been
I
doing.
haven't what the one
I'm
in
just saying the lab of the future. Oh no, I'm just the concept of the lab of the future. I think I've been doing it for the
Forever.
last 20 years. It's always the lab of the
100%.
future. When's the paperless
yeah,
lab of the
but
lab.
the future never comes.
Exactly, yeah. So they're currently, the whole of Cambridge is trying to build the site of the future and then the lab of the future, but they're really taking some consideration about software as well because they're finding it hard to get staff. There's not enough staff to go around, and people will have higher expectations now. So to Stephanie's point, even getting to the web forms and whatever on some of the software that they have to use is proving problematic, let's
Too
say.
much.
And you have to do that or people will walk. And it's
Mm.
interesting that that user experience now and getting better value out of your users so they're not doing those tedious things is has been recognized by a number of companies that we've worked with, and they've sort of said, look, what can we do here? So
Yeah.
I think
I
it's
think
important.
there's also an issue, if I can take it on a sidebar, is also the role of universities in training people because they generally purchase or get given software that doesn't have all the data integrity functions.
Yeah.
There was a post on LinkedIn several months ago that I commented on, probably not too politely, um, but I should know better, but don't. Which was really about, oh, you can carry out your own installation. It's all done automatically. And oh, if you come from the pharmaceutical industry, we'll sell you a Part 11 add-on. You want the Part 11 add-on in the university. You got to train people in data integrity and data quality. But you get the raw material. Oh, if I don't like that, I can just delete it. Not in this environment, you can't. And
Yeah.
that's where I think there's an educational problem coming into the industry,
Hmm.
as well as a lot of knowledge being either paid off or retiring from it.
Yeah.
I
That's
agree.
interesting. Yeah. And I mean,
I also see a lot of people that are taking this wave of new development, right, and new excitement. And so when people are seeing new systems available, right, where like to what you're talking about, Bob, there might be new systems available, and they're like, oh, we work in the spirit of Part 11 compliance, like or things like that. We're like, what is or we're in the spirit of
Basically,
SOC 2 attestment. Like what is what does that
it's
mean? So you have to be careful and read the fine print because they say that they're doing all the right things, but if you really pressure test it, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors.
it.
So
I think the technical term is non-compliant.
yes, that is not compliant,
yes.
but I'm
Yeah.
not being nice this
Sure,
time
though.
right now.
Yeah. And it's
So
interesting. I mean, given that I've been a LIMS guy for 25 years, very rarely see one implemented in universities. We did work with some during COVID, and that was that was when SaaS was a really useful thing. We had Platform for
Mm.
Science, had a version of that was sort of we gave to the historically black universities to help them do testing internally. And that's probably the first time they were exposed to a proper LIMS system.
limbs,
Generally, they would be getting lower costs or freeware, and it's a
yeah.
free
Yeah.
for all, as you point out, Bob. And I think maybe that rigor is something that we need to sort of have at least as a course in the university, or,
Yes.
or
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not just for pharma or biotech or biopharma. It's for any lab
Mhm.
role that you do. You've got to have the ethos, the integrity to do the work. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Mm.
sorry, I that
Yeah.
was a sidebar. I do apologize, guys.
No,
Continue the
no.
sidebars. I think that's why this is a conversation rather than just a set of questions. They're just to kick things off.
Absolutely. No, I agree. Um, on that point, how have bioanalytical labs changed? I mean, we talked a little bit about customer expectations there. I mean, what do they require from LIMS? How are the requirements changing?
I'm gonna let Stephanie take that one because she's a real bioanalyst.
I'm the real bioanalyst.
I'm the
So
ex
Oh,
bioanalyst.
sorry, Bob. Yeah. Well, we're gonna get both of them. Yeah.
I'm ex. Yes, it's close to being a dinosaur.
so I think that, I mean, if we talk about scientifically, the data types that we're dealing with are increasing, meaning,
Yeah,
if we go when I started, when I, in the early 2000s, when I got out of my PhD program, I actually had a protein background, but I had to learn mass spec in order to get a job because there wasn't really any place for me to get a job in industry with only, protein based knowledge, right? So I had to do some side programs to learn small molecule to get a job and make myself applicable. That is not the case anymore. We have cell gene therapy, we have monoclonal antibodies, fusion proteins. It keeps going on and on. So what we have is these aren't old techniques at all. I mean, these aren't new techniques. We have flow cytometry, ligand binding assays, molecular assays. They've been around for decades, if not
yeah.
longer, but not in
Biomarkers.
a
Mm.
exactly, but we're bringing that into a regulated form, and we're now expecting a LIMS-based system that was built for chromatography to be able to pull in and understand data from a
Yeah,
molecular assay that deals in triplicates. That's just those things are take a lot more of that adaptation, but that is the expectation now because we're used to working. We need to have those types of data to be able to filter into a similar system. So that's one
Mm.
of the
and
big bioanalytical changes that I'm seeing, as well as going from when I started my software company like 7, 8 years ago, we were all serverless, cloud-based, and it was just blew people's mind that we had no physical servers, none. And now I think that's starting to become that chasm, but like people are starting to want a SaaS-based, not only a SaaS-based, being able to, purchase that and have a license in that approach, but then also have it be a cloud-based. So also how you interact and purchase software is changing. So
mm,
the complexity of the assay and the data and the change in how people are purchasing software and interacting with the software has all changed.
yeah, I think you're also seeing the move, probably alluded to slightly differently. You're moving from small heterocyclic chemistry to bio macromolecules, biosimilars, ATPM, all of these sort of things coming in,
Yes, very
and
complex.
the analytical techniques are changing, and
Yes.
the data that are generated, you're moving from what essentially are mass spectrochromatograms through to individual point values, moving from linear to non-linear models, things like that. And if you're really going to go into looking at data and managing it, you've got to be able to have the information or the actual data files in a common um, format so that you can start to do decent searches across a protocol or even between protocols to see if there are um, particular trends coming out within your drug development project. And I think
Yeah.
that's something.
So
Um,
possibly might into the conversation there as the technology guy, I suppose. But that's one of the things that I think some of the new tooling we were talking about, AI being one of them, but things like graph databases. This idea of putting metadata around these various
yeah.
data that are captured, in order that you can interpret them in that way, or you can allow the
Trends.
computer to interpret them more easily or search them more easily.
Mm.
a big long Google search is just not the way, really. You
No.
need to have that context. Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
go back, I mean, we implemented our first LIMS with putting analytical balances online. We put our chromatographic integrators online. It was a one-way transfer, but we were only transferring the value of the weight.
Yeah.
We had to use the LIMS only had, oh, we're weighing this particular reference compound, but we didn't have anything about the batch number. We didn't have anything about the way the balance was working. All of that has to be up there so that you've got that metadata and you can then trend it on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
And that's really got to be the thing
That's
that's
almost baseline now, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
But
that's
And
data. How did you get it? What's its
yeah,
provenance? And
yeah. And one of the biggest problems, if I can go back to what Stephanie was saying, with all these new techniques coming into a regulated environment, they're coming out of what essentially one can politely call the Wild West, because
yes,
they're
they are.
coming out of research
Mhm.
and audit trail. Oh, we don't worry about that shit.
Yeah.
Or what about, oh, you mean we've got to have our own unique user ID? We can't
Oh,
all be admins? Oh dear.
Yeah.
it's
No,
so
I
true.
mean,
So many times.
to
And the
I
systems have to have that functionality in them.
and
Mm.
and that's where I'm finding that, especially like you said, in the molecular flow-based assays, like how do you have a system that a limb system that has the flexibility of
Yes.
taking in all of this type of data and never, I mean, and I work in this field, but immunogenicity, oh, please, like, how do you handle that? It's semi-quantitative. Which I know the limb system has, but like, that's, you have to build, how do you build in the flexibility to be able to take in all these types of data and that are slightly processed differently and have
May
slightly
not
different
be.
outputs,
Yeah.
but have it be validated. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
it's just a really difficult task to ask a single
It,
system
it's
to
it's not.
do. So,
It may be that you don't put it all in the limbs. You
yep,
have it in a pool that the limbs can access and
yes.
then pull
Hmm.
back and summarize.
And that's the model that I think that, I've been talking to David about, is like you have these settle, like what we were talking about before as well, is like tools that can pull data and can trend data or process data, like, so they sit above it, or outside of it, so that, but you have to have that fetching also validated and
Mhm.
secure. But those would have a different type of validation requirement, right? Because
Yeah,
it's not a
but
data intent, it's
it's not
security,
that
but
difficult. It's
no,
really
that
not
part is
that.
not.
But
That part is
the
not.
other thing is that this comes back to the design of analytical instruments. Because if you go and you go around any, well, I mean, EBF or wherever you're going would probably have a small would have an instrument expo or something like that,
Oh
or you
yeah,
go
always,
to
yeah.
PitCon or somewhere like that.
Hmm.
And when you look at a piece of kit, it's designed to operate on the bench,
Hmm.
In a
and
rack or
that's
not
where
on
it
a robot.
sits.
Yeah.
Hey?
Not in a rack or not on a robot or anything like that. I mean,
No,
it's
no, no. But I mean, the data sit there on the bench. It
uh,
may or may not be connected to the network. Uh, the data backup may be, and I hate to say this, a USB stick or drive.
Oh gosh, no, yeah.
virus carrier. Yeah.
On the other hand, USB backups are an auditor's dream. It's almost like spreadsheets. It's Christmas has come early. But really the design should be it's the electronic equivalent of a locked filing cabinet. You
Yeah.
can't share the data. The design of instruments needs to come down so that the data, you have the workstation controlling the instrument, but the data go down to the network. And once you got it on the network, you can review it, and then you can start to search it, you can pull it out, and you can start to look at things far more than if it's just a standalone workstation sitting
Oh,
on the
yeah.
bench.
So
You look at
you
a,
hit
yeah,
my soapbox, Bob. You hit my soapbox. So I for sort of the middle of my career, when I stepped away from Watson for the first time, I moved into what we called back then SDMS, Scientific Data Management
oh,
Systems.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And I spent basically most of that early career wrapping enterprise software around these small systems to try and alleviate some of the problems that you were talking about.
Mm.
And then, well, you remember then it was all just about it was actually 21 CFR compliance. It's like, can you show me where this has come from? Can you give me an
Yeah.
accurate and complete record of that?
Yeah,
But the system I was working with, which we still have the technology for, was actually extracting the chromatograms and it's pulling out all the metadata as well. And I don't think we realized what we had back then. The
Mm.
winner ended up being an approach of just like doing PDFs and capturing the PDF chromatogram was easier to do, and we know where
yeah,
that led
yeah.
to
But
many
that's
times.
electronic paper.
Yeah.
Exactly, the glass. But what I was going to say is that extraction of data now, actually coming towards some of the stuff that we're doing with our next generation LIMS or next generation platform. We're not calling it just LIMS because
Mhm.
LIMS, everyone has a very fixed perception of what that is. And then we've got other four-letter acronyms
Life
for
is made
scientific data
slower.
management. It makes life is made slower.
Oh,
Thank
sorry.
you. I'm writing that one down. Well, it's recorded
That's
now.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is. You're right. So
It could be labyrinth of incompatible machines and software.
that's
But
just a
if you
laugh.
get it
They
right,
just keep on
if
coming. They just keep on coming.
but if you get it right, life is made simpler.
That's a gift, Bob. Thank you. I like that. So
If you use it in your marketing material, I'll take royalties, please.
oh man, that's happened now as well. Ah, okay. Well, I could have got away with it. It's not in the public domain. So, but yeah. So, getting back to the scientific data management aspect is we were taking so much of that metadata and we were just sealing it in Aspic, and you could bring it back and you actually look. You could look at
Mm.
that peak that you couldn't see on the PDF. You could actually go down and look at it. And that
Yeah.
I don't think we didn't realize, and the people didn't realize the value of that. But I think now that's the type of level of data recording you want. You need that metadata. Where did it come from? Where's
Yeah,
it all
yeah,
fail?
yeah,
Give me all the XY because if you can feed that into, you can first of all make it fair. It's a trendy way of saying it, but make it findable, and then make it actionable because you've got it in a format that you don't need to have Excalibur or whatever it was to look at the data. I think that unlocks it for some of these techniques that Stephanie's talking about.
mm,
The synthesis of data
Predictive
through
modeling.
AI. Yeah.
Yeah, because the more data you have and the more data that an end user can pull within their own system is just I've seen just recently some presentations at different conferences about predictive modeling for chromatography to be able to understand and take away 80% of the work. And a lot of the key thing is if you just go to the research, what's published, you only have positive data, you don't have the negative data. So like, but within like their own systems, right? Because you only publish what works. So within their own systems, they can actually go back and pull data. And like you said, the more granular we can go
yeah,
into that, um, it used to be that's what we'd want to get rid of, right? We wanted to like sift through that. But now, because computer systems are just much more um, they can process things so much quicker than we could ever imagine. That
Mhm.
the more we throw at it, the better productivity it can have, right?
And that's the machine
So
learning aspect, isn't it? Rather than it's not
yes,
AI, it's just machine learning. We've done some really large scale studies with our chromatography team and some of our customers where you actually map the changes that customers make because the algorithm hasn't got it right as far as the peak fitting
yeah,
mm, mm.
or baseline finding, and that's what this machine learning is just ideal for. It can
it
see
eats it up. It's
anomalies.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's really incredible. Like if you truly change your mindset of like having a computer system when you're first like a predictive model set up to be like you're training a new laboratory staff. right?
Yeah.
If you really do change this and think of it that way, then you can move on to where you expect it to fail up front. You feed it a whole bunch of different struggles and data that you've optimized previously, different use cases, and have it learn from that. It's only going to improve over time, but you have to give it all these different use cases that both failed and worked. So it's pretty, yeah, if you think of it, like I'm trying to change my mindset of the different AI approaches we're using and really trying to change my mindset of it won't work first off, but how do we give it enough data so that it knows how to
And it's
proceed?
about doing your homework, isn't it? I mean, it's about, as Bob was saying, capturing that metadata. What is the provenance of the data? If you've got all of
Mhm.
that and you have it stored in a rational manner, you can do all of these things that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like this
So,
is time I should probably jump in. This is a very interesting discussion. I feel like I'm becoming more of a viewer as I'm just kind of sitting, soaking it all in. But I'm conscious I've still got a couple of questions left. So you mentioned kind of new data types coming in, and earlier we talked about kind of potential black box technologies like AI. How can lab teams ensure data system auditing remains
Seamless and transparent, I guess. But so, I think it has to be built in from the start. I think that goes back to another thing that Bob said when he's talking about the universities. If you're going to use a system in a regulated environment, I think it has to be designed from the ground up to
yeah,
do that. Yeah.
the key thing here is understand the process. If you don't understand the process that you are trying to automate, why bother? So understand the process, then try and work out where there are bottlenecks and everything else. And you want to design the process so that it acquires data at source. You don't retype any data. You know where the data goes, so you pull it back again. Allied with that, we're on a mission to exterminate Excel and get rid of paper. And the whole point is to use electronic signatures and attribution of action. Please don't sign everything. Attribution of action is quite sufficient. If all else fails, read the particular regulations you're working to. There are not many requirements for electronic signatures, but get the process right and then put the system on, put the application on top, and that will help you do things a lot better. And if you're migrating from a legacy system, find out from the users what they like about the current system, the legacy system, and it's going to be a pretty short list, and find out what they don't like, and I'm fairly certain that's going to be a lot longer. And then you've got to carry the things they like forward into the new system or manage expectations if they're not there. And you've got to eliminate many of the bugbears and the problems with the current system for the new system. And a lot of this is about user management or management of user expectations rather than being of technical excellence. It's the human bit rather than anything else. But
And do
Because
you
if you make
also, sorry, Dave, go ahead.
because if you make it easy for them to do, or it's seen as a help rather than a hindrance, they're much more likely to comply and to use it and to not try and work
yeah,
around it. Be pleased to hear,
but
Bob, that I was actually in a lab in Yorkshire last week doing exactly that, following them around with my video camera, and telling them,
yeah, yeah,
"Old baby ugly, tell us what you don't like about this, and then tell us what you like
Yeah.
about it," and
yeah.
with exactly that
It's
in mind.
that's
Yeah,
fundamental.
yeah,
Because if you
And
don't manage those expectations, sorry, Stephanie, if you don't
that's
manage
okay.
those expectations, you're going to have a major problem. And you'd be better off giving the money you're going to spend on that system to my grandson because he'll piss it away far quicker than you ever will.
I also
Sorry, a
think that there
technical
needs to
term.
be, that's all right. There also needs to be an interaction with systems change as a
Mm,
community, meaning like we talked about the human in the loop. What do I mean by that?
yes,
We're used
yes.
to setting up systems and locking them down and not touching them. And that's just not how we should approach our systems anymore. Meaning, if we're going to have constant, not constant, like timely updates for security purposes or timely updates to our apps and our workflows, we need to have the people not feel like that I'm only going to do this once and I'm never going to have to touch it again. Thank God, right? It has to be more interactive in their systems as well. Like from a user expectation, the user also has to change their mindset. So I think it needs to come both ways if does that make sense to you? Because
Mm.
what I don't think is sustainable is the idea that you just set something up and you don't have to touch it around for like another decade, right? Because then nothing's going to improve from both standpoints, right? If you do want improvements, there also has to be um, a constant, like you have to interact and really think truly about how to improve and really not just expect it to be locked down and not have to do any, like not be lazy anymore, I guess is what I'm
Well,
saying.
the thing there, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Stephanie, that the if I go back to custom limbs, people spend a lot of time, get a custom limbs, and they can't change easily.
Anything, I know.
Yeah, I've been there, done that. But
And so
the
you don't want to lock yourself down so much
no,
because
no,
then
but that's
everything's
the
changing.
but that's the classic farmer approach. It's
I know.
validated. Don't touch it. Don't even
Batch,
think about it.
golden batch, if you
I
like.
know, right? And so but that's just like, that's not, I guess that's no longer our world that we're living in. So how do we make sure, like, how do we find that sweet spot of having a validated system and not having this Wild West situation? Because we can't have that either, right? We need to
But
truly have things secure and locked down, but then
in
the
a
end user knows that they have to contribute to that functionality
but
as well.
if that comes back in a way to SaaS. Sorry, should I
Yeah.
be jumping into SaaS at this moment? But it comes into SaaS in the fact that you have a house of cards. That's not meant in a derogatory sense, but you've got a house of cards where you have the ISP, the supplier, and then the application. So you've got the ISP doing all the cybersecurity and everything else, and the
Mhm.
keeping everything up to speed. You've got the um, supplier producing um, updates somewhere between every 3 to 12 months. And this is where people have to have that balance between the validation treadmill, where, oh God, another 3 months and I've got another incremental validation.
Yeah.
But what you have to think about is what has changed? Can I use it? Can I turn it off? And
Mhm.
if you and it would be easier to handle it on an annual basis, but that's my personal view as a lab manager. But the point would be, are you going to use it? If not, document you're not going to use it and only focus your revalidation on what's changed, because the software is not rewritten every 3 months. It's only incremental changes that are added, and therefore you can be a lot smarter with your validation.
Yeah. Computer system assessment as opposed to that, like
Oh, not
that's
computer software assurance, please. I
Oh,
I have
is
I
that
should
as
say
we
um
did I almost make it to the end of the hour without upsetting you, Bob?
um
No.
no, well, no, it's usually me that upsets other people. You see, having written an article some 4 years ago about, entitled rather mildly, "Does CSA mean complete stupidity assured?" The other two articles that I've published since then, and one in preparation, goes downhill in a similar fashion. I think it is probably summarized somewhere between snake oil and old wine in new bottles. If you've been up to speed on CSV, you wouldn't be moaning like hell to the FDA. And whatever they're trying to do in medical devices may not be applicable in pharma.
But yeah, I mean, but you're saying that a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here about sort of being able to keep things moving and keep things validated, but do it in a way that isn't
It's
stealing
smart.
It's a risk base.
Is already, we should be able to do it with the regulations we have, I think was your implication.
Yeah. Oh, the risk-based approach has been here for 20 years.
While.
Read the 2002. It says in section 2.3 in the table of contents, block capital letters, least burdensome approach.
There you go. Yeah.
And in section 6, which is going to be replaced by the CSA, it gives you all the information about leveraging suppliers, seeing what risk and everything else. So instead of 3 pages, you've now got 40 pages to deal with. Isn't
But
that?
I mean, that notwithstanding, I think there is that way forward. I think that if I think we're all of the same opinion that people have to be rational and not be scared. I think I was sort of doing Watson a lot at the start of the century, and I would do risk assessments for people, and they would say, "That's really nice, David. Just do them all. Like do all of the OQ scripts, even though we've done the risk assessment." At least now people are doing a subset, for instance, and being much more confident about it. But I don't think they're leveraging it enough, in their sort of PQs and what have you.
I think what you see, have a look at if you do a proper supplier assessment, if you look at the CSA guidance, final guidance, it talks about thorough assessment of suppliers in terms of their software development processes. Now, when we did an assessment of Watson going back to 2003, 2004 in Philadelphia, we spent 2 days looking at how you developed it, and we applied that to the validation a few miles up the road. The key thing here was that if you do an assessment, look at the individual functions within the application. Are they configured, i.e. they're GAMP software category 3, or are they parameterized, which is GAMP software category 3? So if sorry, have I got around the wrong way? GAMP category 3 parameterized. So you just change the value, but you don't change the business process. Or if it's category 4, it's configured. And the issue there is, if it's parameterized, the supplier's tested it. You've got the evidence from the supplier. Why do you need to go and test it?
Yeah.
And then you take 21 CFR 5861 equipment, adequate capacity for the protocol. So what's the biggest number of samples you're going to be taking through? Then you can start to justify things on a case-by-case basis. It makes it so much easier.
Just applying what's already there as far as the
Well, what we've even gotten to do with our systems is we've actually brought in a third party vendor and just had them do the test scripts and validation as well. So that way our clients can take that and use it. But you'd be surprised how many times they don't even want to take that, even though that we have our own documentation and third party, they want to perform it themselves. So we have even tried to, and so we do limit it to like, here's one script. We have hundreds of test scripts if you want to play with them, but here's one script and you can run it through. Here's the OQPQ doc. We don't need the IQ because we're cloud based. So we have our own IQ that we do separately with AWS, but you'd be surprised how, I'm like, if someone just handed me a third party and their own, I'd be like, okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Well, that's the
mindset.
The only thing you've got the only thing that a prospective customer has to look at then is
What we're doing.
your approach
Yeah.
equivalent to theirs, and can they live with it?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And sometimes it's one of those where because being previously an end user of software, I was like, oh my gosh, if someone came to me and I did the full vetting and I did the vendor assessment and
Yeah.
an auditing of them, I'd be like, and done. So thank you very much. And I would take and I do some sort of like, full documentation of that. Yeah. So I think that's also a mind switch. I'm finding people are being a little more open to it.
Yeah.
And I just find that that's also like a fear base, like you said, we have to change our mindset of how, so we're not overburdening
Yeah.
ourselves, like being our own worst
It's
enemy in that way, because
and you don't have screenshots. You use the audit trail. You use the electronic records generated by the system.
yeah,
I mean, if I go
we,
back to when I first was at a consultant, I was taken into a room in one client, and they had two large double doored filing cabinets, and they opened them up and they said, "These are our screenshots
oh gosh,
Yeah.
for our
Yeah.
limbs," and
I,
they're
I totally
6 foot
made them.
high,
Yes.
double doored, and I'm thinking,
my goodness.
what?
Mhm.
I mean,
Nope.
the total package for ours was that thick, and I was like, well,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we used to constantly have photographs of the stack of OQ testing that people would do for Watson,
Yep.
and that was avant-garde because we gave the script to people. But
sorry,
how much of that was
avant-garde?
real?
You mean haven't a clue?
Yeah, good way of putting it. Exactly. Yeah. So, I was actually one of the things that I really liked when I came back into the Watson fold. For our own purposes internally, we've actually started to automate the internal testing.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
For people to work this
Integration
all.
testing. Yeah.
And it means it's so much quicker to get increases the cycle time. We can get more out. It's taken us, it used to take months. It now can take weeks. That we could
Mhm.
potentially put that in the hands of the customers as well if they really wanted to do the full OQ. But that in they really should be thinking more on the lines that you're describing. It's like, well, do you even
Yeah.
need to do all of that? Do you think that the printer driver isn't going to work, or no, that's not a good
Yeah.
example. Or that you don't think
No, no.
the calculation for some reason is going to be different than when you execute it than when it's
Yeah,
executed
yeah.
by them. And it's that level of getting that level of trust, and maybe it
But
comes down to yeah,
to a certain extent, it also goes back to how well have they specified their requirements. Because if they haven't thought about all this detail, then you got a problem.
Or
yeah,
if their requirements are somewhat outdated.
Yeah,
So, right.
yeah,
And they're not thinking about the current situation or current technology and what it's needed to fully vet it, right? Because if you're dealing with requirements from a quality assurance or a software IT group that's 20 years in the past and they haven't updated it or realized changes to processes, then they're going to come to it as an
mm,
outdated approach too.
yeah. I think we're all crusading here, aren't we? Have to change the title of the podcast, but so how are we doing on time, Robert?
Yeah, so I'm going to jump in there. We've got a couple of questions on cloud before we get to the end. I think we've probably got about 10 minutes before we need to stop for the Q&A, just
Okay.
to let you guys know. So as you mentioned cloud and SaaS earlier, I just wanted to ask.
I lost Robert again. I think he was asking us about the advantages of SaaS, what it brings to the labs compared with
yeah.
on-premise system in BioA as well. Yeah. Um,
I I think
I'd like to, you and I will probably have the same experience here. I had a hard time talking to people about SaaS and cloud over the last 10, 15 years. I ran the Thermo Fisher cloud for 3 or 4 years, and that's why I live in California now. And everyone's very, very paranoid about it. But I remember almost every Watson system I installed back in the day was on, it was on a
on-prem.
Yeah, well, it was on-prem, but it was hosted in a CSC data center or an IBM data center
Would be, yeah,
you
yeah.
and
It's a
SaaS is
hotel. It's a hotel rather than on-prem. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So we've been doing that for decades, really. If people are worried about this new technology, I mean, there's a you might want to talk to the sort of lap access to the infrastructure, for instance. At least if you had IBM, you could go and say, "I'd like to go and see my server now, please," and they
mm,
would let you see it.
Walk you there. Yeah.
Yeah, but
I think
nowadays,
well, partly there's an issue with security. I think there's also however, under GDPR in the Europe, Amazon are a little more flexible in terms of allowing people into their data centers. But
seriously,
they have, when I was advising someone 7, 8 years ago to go to put their application on, Amazon were very, very customer focused, but you wouldn't even get a sniff of the data center. But last year edited, I reviewed a report where a consortium of companies went to and
hmm
one Amazon site, but I don't know how amenable they are to everyone going.
yeah, yeah,
But you have, it is, I think, even an ISO 17001 site actually is very, very, very good.
yeah.
Um, hang on a sec. I think my grandson has just decided to forget his keys.
Okay,
Hang on.
Okay.
Can I go and
okay.
let
We'll
the,
just see you without him,
to
Bob, for a
quote a
second.
phrase and give a very bad impersonation, I'll be back.
Okay, but yeah, we'll talk a little about that. But when so yeah, the question was around sort of what the advantages SaaS brings. I think I was just trying to lean into the paranoia that people have had about it, and I think really it's unnecessary. But Stephanie, I think you might be able to summarize the advantages, given that you've gone SaaS from the start.
We have gone SaaS from the start, and we did run into people's fear. So therefore, we have went through much of the compliance, the 27001 SOC to confirm and just ensure people of our security. Uh, what I have found is actually in my own experience is that, for example, with our data, um, minimal is rate maintained with a lot of our processing. Actually, there's like instantaneous computers like disappear within milliseconds. So in some ways, in the level of encryption, it's safer in many ways. It feels strange to say that. It's just more difficult to get in. And it's not like you said, or even if it's a firewall behind a firewall, once you're in there, there's ways to get into the system. Whereas if it's completely serverless like ours, it's actually in many ways I found more
You,
secure
yeah, you
in a
can't walk into
fashion.
the data center and steal a drive or anything
Yeah,
like.
you can there is no data center. There's nothing
Oh,
to physically
no,
hack
the
into,
access.
like
Yeah.
physically, yeah, physical asset.
Interesting.
But
That
we're
that that comes Thane Erickson in the cloud session at EBF. He asked for a show of hands, and he asked who thinks cloud systems are the most secure, and they asked who thought on-prem systems are the most secure. I was actually astounded, given that these are bioanalysts we're talking about. 90% said cloud. Now,
I
I
think
don't
it's shifted.
think that 5 years ago. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, no, like 5 years ago, before COVID, I would say it was the exact opposite. I would have said that was flipped. But I think with COVID, and with people going remote and realizing that the only way to truly do a remote job is to be
Mm.
able to
Trust.
truly do it remote, is to trust the cloud-based systems or remote access and really not have to be reliant on wholly physical.
I would
Um,
say at this point, if I can interrupt, I
sure.
did some work with a client who was looking to, because they were relatively small, a startup, they were looking to obviously go to the cloud. But one of the criteria that was enforced very strongly was that any supplier had to have a failover in a different data center so that you didn't lose data. And that was, I think, very, very important, because what you want to make certain is that if you've taken all this time and effort to validate the system, get your people trained, and all of a sudden there's a snafu in the data center and you lose all your data. And the OVH data center fire in Strasbourg in March 2021 was a case in point. Everything, if you didn't have backup, everything went up in flames.
Yeah.
Backup versus being cloud-based. Yeah. I mean, you always need backup and you need to have that configured appropriately. I completely agree because of the importance of the data. But that is just, once again, going to the vendor and making sure they've thought through that and they have that like enabled, because that is actually not as difficult. It just means that you have to set that up as a supplier. You have to set up your own infrastructure with that in mind, because so that you have redundancies. So I completely agree. But that wouldn't make cloud not feasible. You just need to make sure your vendor has that built in.
Every Watson implementation I did in my earlier career, I would go to the data center, go to the data technician, the guy who'd set up the Oracle database, and say, "Can you show me your RAID array? Can I pull one of those disks now?" And only once in all of my career did anyone ever let me pull a disk. Because before I started doing all of that work, I wanted to make sure that the infrastructure was in place. So, I mean, we are now trusting but verifying, I guess, in some respects.
Yeah. No, it's good.
Yeah.
So just, I'm conscious we're running out of time. There's just one more question, which is going to involve you getting out your crystal balls a little bit. I just wanted to ask, what trends do you see emerging over the next 5 years, if you don't mind?
Well, I'll go first. I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can, David.
Well, again, I think we're touching on some of these things. The sort of the adoption of the new technologies to be able to deal with the new technologies or the new techniques that you're seeing within bioanalysis, and that I think the expectation sort of AI and some of the stuff that we're going to see that we're already seeing from AI is going to drive another cycle of change. I think cloud and SaaS was probably the last decade's sort of driving force around that. But I think that that and the ability to automate the data aspect of it using AI, and I would say probably in conjunction with that, the idea of being able to do lab automation on a more efficient level. So, a little bit of a pitch, but we actually merged our enterprise software team that build the Connect platform and Watson and what have you with our lab automation team with a very specific sort of goal to try and make that easier. Because at the moment it's still a special kind of person that can do lab automation and somewhat special people that do the enterprise software. And I think that confluence is something that I hope we'll see, and I think that the customers are demanding.
I think one of the areas that I would see is to actually try and automate sample management a bit more. You may end up with almost like high throughput screening, where you've got these big sample trays, robotics picking things out, but you'll need it in deep freeze, could be -20, could be -40, or even -80. But you want to be able to move samples in and out quickly and link that with the LIMS.
And the robot automation. So Bob, there'll be an article out that we're doing with a large pharma company very soon mentioning Connect, but we've started to do that. That they're using the I think it's called the Zenta BioStore or something like that, but it's essentially got, as you say, that all of the sample handling is done through that. And know where the
you load it up manually.
Yeah.
And you can. Yeah.
And they aliquot the plates for you. And having spent I said I was in Yorkshire last week. I spent a lot of time actually following around the sample handling folks in a bioanalysis lab, and it was like, there's a lot of manual work here, and there's a room for improvement there.
I was sorry, Stephanie.
Go ahead, finish your thought, and I have my.
I was helping someone to validate their new LIMS, and what they had done was take the original LIMS functionality and just copied it into the new one. And I'm thinking, no, because you just take a walk around the lab, and what you find in many locations, I think bioanalytical is an exception to this, but what you find in many GMP labs is that the LIMS is one of the most expensive electronic typewriters in the world. No instruments are connected, not even a balance. It's absolutely bonkers. So instruments have to be connected, and you've got to get everything there. Anyway.
Yeah, Stephanie.
What I think is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe not, it would be definitely behind with pharma, is I feel like AI agents are going to come into play, where you have different AIs assigned different work, and then they all flow into each other, is something that we're doing, even down to where you have one AI agent like trying to pull data or pull it from a LIMS-based system. Then you have another one that might be doing some predictive modeling or writing up a report or auditing the data set. And then you'll have the last AI agent, which actually goes and checks the tasks of all the other ones that are doing it. And it's just, now that is got to be a while, but that's where I see us going, is that you have your LIMS-based system. And I do think right now, because of kind of the hesitancy and being able to do a true validation based on AI itself, there's going to need to be a transition from more of a logic-based code where you can do a true validation from A to point B, and you know how it got there. And we're going to transition and have certain activities based on maybe a logic-based system, and others that don't require that will be more of an AI-based agent system. And I think that will enable us to connect various different parts of our workflow that were siloed together, and then check itself as well with the human oversight. That's where I feel the power will be. That's what we're trying to work on.
Bang on. I think some of these things that we're looking at putting, I think they're called MCP wrappers around our APIs, so that the agents can speak to them as well as the humans, because it's just such a lot of
exactly. So that's where I see in 5 to 10 years, I'd be interested to see where it's even happening. Like you said, Bob, like where is this happening and we don't even know it's happening, because it might just become so part of ingrained in our workflow, just like our cell phones are now, that they weren't before.
So I'm going to have to jump in there and cut you guys off. Thank you so much for this very informative discussion. It's been really interesting. We're now going to proceed over to our very brief question and answer session. Just first on the topic of kind of this has obviously been focused more on LIMS, but on the topic of LIMS and ELN convergence, I mean, what are your thoughts on the convergence of these software? Do you think it will happen, or do you think they will continue to be separate? I did make a note there, David. You mentioned next gen platform, and you didn't go as far as to use the word LIMS. Is that slightly indicative of what's going on?
Absolutely. I mean, we've all seen sort of what happens with the ELNs over the years. ELNs with the free-form tools, that you can't. LIMS is too hard because of some of the phrases that Bob used. We made it too hard and made it slower. But then what you would tend to see is people would go really fast, implement their methods in an ELN, but in a free-form fashion, then couldn't access the data, realize they needed structure, and start to try and build LIMS structure into an ELN. And we see that in almost everyone who uses an ELN in a large scale, they end up trying to build a LIMS inside of it. It needs to be done from the ground up. So, we're building a platform rather than a LIMS. We're building tools that sit on that platform that allow you to do LIMS-like functionality, and we'll do ELN type of functionality. Also, it's not necessarily an ELN in the traditional sense that you need in bioanalysis. It's more what we would term a lab execution system, which is, takes you through the steps and makes sure you do the steps correctly. There's a nuance there, and because we've put this word soup around what you need to do in a lab, I think we've compartmentalized things too much, and I think it's time to sort of step back, look at what the lab needs, build the tools, not have people have to buy different bits of software, make the tools such that they will do the specific task that they need to do. And if that involves some lab execution capabilities, then that will be part of the the configuration or the built out system on top of the underlying platform. That's kind of how we're seeing things going forward.
I think you've been seeing convergence, LIMS, ELN, LES, whatever it is. There've been convergence for the past 15, 20 years. It's just how it converges, and they tend to be add-ons, and whether things actually work together is dependent on how well it's been conducted. I'll be interested in seeing what your platform looks like when it's available.
Yeah, we're hoping to do that, do it from the ground up. We're doing the boring stuff and the sort of underpinnings that we'll share. It starts with the audit and quality, and then building fit for purpose applications on top of that, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel for the things that are common. But we're definitely taking a leaf out of Watson's book to do a bioanalytical application that sits on top of that platform that does exactly what you need in bioanalysis, and you don't have to configure it yourself. Like your comments about GAMP3 versus GAMP4, we still want to stay in that sort of parameter.
I think and the more GAMP3 functions that you can get that enable people, providing they've done an adequate or a thorough assessment, it means that you can they can leverage that and reduce the amount of work they do.
Yeah, and they can upgrade.
Providing they have the courage to say, yes, I'm going to do this, but it's been around for years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a quick one, if we've got time. Do you see LIMS as a value add for small to mid-size virtual pharma companies?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's I think where some of the hosting and other tools that you can actually turn on, validate quickly. You don't have to buy the infrastructure. So for the small companies, I think we're finding that's actually kind of one of the, even for Watson, one of the growth areas was when we started to make it a hosted solution that people could rent. It means you can get your Watson, get your thing set up, and then stick red thread on top or whatever to
it moves the application from the finance director's perspective. It moves it from a capex to a revenue function, which is 100% tax deductible. I mean, it's great for the supplier. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't mention that, should I?
Yeah, but also, I mean, it's exactly, but it's rapid. I think that's the thing, and it means people are up and running without having to have a full IT department and a cybersecurity department, which
most people don't have at that size.
Probably the highest level of investment in our organization in IT has been cybersecurity over the last three to 4 years.
Well, you look at Jaguar Land Rover and a few other companies.
Yeah. So if you can get that as part of the SaaS offering, don't underestimate the value of it, I think.
Okay, and yes, so thank you for the discussion. I'll have to call it there. Unfortunately, if we haven't managed to get to your question, as I said at the beginning, we will pass these along to the relevant people and we'll get those answered at a later date. That brings us to the end of today's webcast. Live on the Scientific Computing World website. Apologies, I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulty.
Here again.
Content will remain live on the Scientific Computing World website at www.scientific-computing.com for the next 12 months. So please spread the word if you have enjoyed this presentation. Once again, thank you very much to our speakers, David Joyce, Dr. Stephanie Prasas-Farmer, and Dr. Bob McDowell. And of course, thank you to our sponsor, Thermo Fisher Scientific. Thank you all for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye now.